Blasphemy law is, and has always been, a disgrace to any country that calls itself free. As George Orwell once said, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Now, we often hear that the Western world is free, and indeed, much of it is. Within the confines of decency, we are free to act as we wish, and we're entirely free to think and speak as we wish. That is, unless you live in Denmark, Finland, Greece or Ireland. Then you're free to say whatever you want, unless it's something mean about the Abrahamic God. Because, you know, an all-powerful God is vulnerable to mean words. This is the free world's blasphemy law, debunked. In 2015, on RTE1's The Meaning of Life, Stephen Fry replied to the following question with furious eloquence.
Suppose it's all true, and you walk up to the pearly gates and you are confronted by God. What will Stephen Fry say to him, her, or it?
I will basically, what's known as theodicy, I think. I'll say bone cancer in children? What's that about? How dare you? How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault? It's not right. It's utterly, utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain? That's what I'd say.
And you think you're going to get in on
No,
that?
but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to get in on his terms.
Now, first and foremost, I've put a link in the description to the full interview. And if you haven't already seen it, then do. You can thank me for it later. But to get back on topic, in response to Fry's wonderful rant, many butthurt Christians accused him of breaching Ireland's Defamation Act, which includes the following clause. A person who publishes or utters blasphemous matter shall be guilty to an offence and shall be liable upon conviction of indictment to a fine not exceeding €25,000. Now, the problem with this accusation is that it's true. By using his freedom to express his opinion, Fry violated a free country's law. Now, if that isn't a contradiction, then I don't know what is. Free speech is the bedrock of liberty and a free society, and yes, it includes the right to blaspheme and offend. It's the right that allows us to secure and defend all other rights. It is the foundation of a free society, and so therefore, I would argue that either these free countries must abolish their blasphemy laws, or we should no longer refer to them as free. It's simply unacceptable for a country to call itself free while having blasphemy laws. It's utterly, utterly stupid. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the primary point that I want to make with this video. Fry's recent situation has made me realise that much of the free world isn't actually free, and that's sad. To quote Hemant Mehta, it really would be glorious if Fry's brilliant quotation ended up defeating the blasphemy law that should never have been enacted in the first place. And I personally think that refusing to call these countries free until they relinquish such nonsense is a good way to add fuel to the fire. Anyway, with this point made, let's now turn our attention to blasphemy in its entirety, by first clearly stating that blasphemy laws are a fucking joke, and I swear on purpose, because likewise to swearing, blasphemy is a victimless crime. A Christian doesn't get hurt when someone swears or says something mean about their divine North Korea. They get offended, and funny enough, Fry's response to people getting offended is second to none.
It's now very common to hear people say, I'm rather offended by that, as if that gives them certain rights. It's actually nothing more, it's simply a whine. It has no meaning, it has no purpose, it has no reason to be respected as a phrase. I am offended by that. Well, so fucking what? I mean, you know.
And this brings us to the real reason that blasphemy law exists. It's not to defend an all-powerful God, because such a being would be necessarily impervious to offence. It exists to preserve religious ignorance, because deep down, the religious know that their beliefs cannot withstand rationality, and they know that the application of criticism will dissolve their undeserved privileges. That is why blasphemy law exists. The fourth point I want to make is that Fry is absolutely correct when he calls the Abrahamic God a mean-minded maniac. Because if this God exists and truly is all-powerful, as its proponents do indeed claim, then the state of the universe proves, without a doubt, that this God is
Utterly, utterly evil.
To illustrate this, I'm going to quote Epicurus, a man who lived 300 years before the inception of Christianity, and who within this one quote alone entirely eviscerated the idea of an all-powerful and all-loving God for good. Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? Hence, if an all-powerful God exists, then it's necessarily not all-loving, because evil exists. And the final point I want to make is that when Fry stated that he wouldn't want to get into heaven on the Abrahamic God's terms, he demonstrated true morality and real benevolence. Because unlike the religious, who appeal to authority for their morality, Fry demonstrated that he actually cares about the well-being of others. It's all too often that the religious claim to have the moral high ground because they know what the big boss wants, and it never really occurs to them that this isn't actually morality, it's fear. Morality is, as Fry perfectly illustrated, actually giving a fuck about fairness and the consequences of your actions. Anyhow, to recap, Ireland, along with Denmark, Finland and Greece, are not free countries because free speech is essential to a free society, and these countries limit free speech with blasphemy laws. And blasphemy in its entirety is flawed because it's a victimless crime and it exists to preserve ignorance, not to defend an all-powerful God. And an all-powerful and all-loving God definitely doesn't exist because whence cometh evil? Anyhow, as always, thank you kindly for the view, and please consider subscribing to my channel, because under section 36 of the Giant Spaghetti Defamation Act, a person who doesn't subscribe to rationality rules shall be guilty of an offence and shall be liable upon conviction of indictment to a fine not exceeding €25,000.